Up, everybody? I wanted to jump on here. It's this message that's been really resonating in my spirit, and it goes hand in hand. It's the perfect follow-up to the previous video that I did on obedience, because the mind is where everything begins. So I titled this Mind Wars: How the Enemy Wins Without Even Touching You. And I want to start with our base scripture, our anchor scripture, as we like to call it, in Second Corinthians chapter 10 and verse number 5. A very familiar scripture for everybody. Casting down arguments and every high thing that exalts itself against the knowledge of God, bringing every thought into captivity to the obedience of Christ. Now, family, I want you to lean in, because some of us are exhausted, not because life has hit us, but because our mind has been in a war that we never saw coming. The reason you didn't see it coming is because it's a silent war. It's a mental war. It's a war that the enemy wages without ever laying a hand on you. Because I want you to hear me and hear me well. The enemy doesn't need your body if he already has your mind. Let that just sink in for a little while. I feel like this message is going to help a lot of people, because the battle is in our mind. The battle is not around you, it's within you. The Bible tells us clearly what the real fight is. Ephesians 6:12 says, "For we do not wrestle against flesh and blood." That means the real war is not people, it's not circumstances, it's not situations, it's spiritual. And the first place spiritual warfare hits is your mind. That's why Paul says in our anchor scripture, casting down arguments, imaginations, and every high thing. The battle isn't your house, it's in your head. And the enemy wins through suggestion. He doesn't force. It's a subtle thing. The enemy's weapon has always been deception and not necessarily domination. John 8:44 says he is a liar and the father of it. Paul warns us again in 2 Corinthians 11:3. As the serpent deceived Eve, so your mind may be corrupted. He doesn't need to attack your body if he can influence your thinking. Subtle. He whispers. He distorts. He nudges. He twists. And he does it just enough to make us question what God said. Let me take you back to the garden. And I want to say that this is the first mental attack ever recorded. Genesis 3:1 says, "Has God indeed said?" See, check this out. The serpent didn't show up with fire. He didn't shove Eve. He didn't threaten her. He simply talked. He distorted what God said. He twisted the truth. He planted doubt. She wasn't deceived by power. She was deceived by persuasion. And after they fell, look at the effects. The effects weren't physical. The effects were psychological. They hid. They covered. They felt shame. Then God walks in and asks a simple question: where are you? It's not because God didn't know, but because they didn't know where their thoughts had taken them. Does that sound familiar? Because our thoughts can take us to some pretty dark places. Genesis 3:11. Who told you that you were naked? In other words, who fed you that thought? Who changed your identity? Who put that lie in your mind? They weren't running from the serpent, they were running from a thought. Let me tell you something. The fall did not start with a bite, it started with a belief. The serpent didn't win with force, he won with influence. I want to talk a little bit about strongholds and what is a stronghold. And a stronghold is not a demon hiding in the corner. It's a lie that's been so rehearsed in our minds that what happens is that you've believed it long enough that it becomes your truth. Proverbs 23:7 says, as he thinks in his heart, so is he. Your life follows your thoughts. Your habits follow your thoughts. Your bondage follows your thoughts. Romans 12:2, be transformed by the renewing of your mind. Transformation starts in the mind. It does not start with behavior. It starts in your mind. That's why strongholds sound like this. This is just who I am. I always mess up. I'll never change. I'm broken. I came to tell you that those are not facts. They're infiltrations. And what the enemy does is that he comes in subtly and infiltrates your mind, and your mind creates this story, and this story now becomes your reality, not because it is the reality, but because we practice it over and over and over again until you, the child of God, have taken a back seat, and the person driving now are those negative thoughts, those infiltrations that are not fact. The thief comes to steal, kill, and destroy, and he begins with a destructive thought. I can't begin to tell you how many times this has happened in my own personal life. You guys know the story, how I felt. It started with a conversation. It started with, hey, I hang out. I have a family just like you, but this is how I have fun. Next thing you know, I go through years of drug addiction. Why? It started with a conversation that took hold in my mind and manifested itself in my behavior. I hope I'm helping somebody today. I want to break this down for you. Our anchor scripture is 2 Corinthians chapter 10 and verse 5. Let's break it down into 4 parts. And number 1 is casting down imaginations. Your imagination can build a future or it can build a prison. First Peter says, gird up the loins of your mind, strengthen it, prepare it, and protect it. Number 2, tear down high things. Anything, and that's anything that exalts itself over God's voice. So you have God's voice, and then you have these thoughts, right? And these thoughts are here, and they're being rehearsed, and God is here, and then all of a sudden, those high things, because there's nothing higher than God, we rehearse, it becomes a part of who we are, and those thoughts now become higher than God. And those are the things that have to be torn down. Fear, trauma, shame, insecurity. If it's talking louder than God, it must come down. Number 3, take thoughts captive. I want you to think about this. You have to arrest the lie. Whatever it is that the enemy's whispering in your ear, that then you're rehearsing, and then it becomes a part of who you are. You've got to arrest that lie. You got to handcuff that thought, and then you got to drag it before the truth. You are a child of God. You are the head and not the tail. You shall lend and not borrow. You are healed by his blood and by his stripes. Number 4, make it obey Christ. This is the replacement principle. You don't just reject the lies, you replace them with truth. Philippians 4:8, whatever things are true, meditate on these things. Don't just evict the lie. You've got to build some truth, because the truth will always overcome a lie. Telling you right now that the enemy is not going to show up in horns and a tail and red, something that you would run from. He's going to show up like something that you like. He's going to show up like something that's comfortable to you. And it's going to whisper to you, did God really say that? Adam and Eve in the garden is one of the most prominent, one of the best stories and examples for us. First of all, there was separation. Eve is off on her own, and the enemy creeps up, creeping. It says, did God really say that? Is that really what he meant? Everything starts with a conversation. Everything starts with an open door. Everything starts with that small whisper that seems inconsequential, but then eventually it becomes a big deal. You ever heard that everything starts out very small? Come on, you've thought about it right now. Something that started out very small. Maybe it was just one drink. Maybe it was just one conversation. Maybe it was just one smoke. Maybe it was just one. You know what I'm talking about. It started with one. Started with one text. Started with one conversation. Started with one lunch. Started with one dinner. And then it blew up into something that is so out of control that it has turned your life around. It started with one missed Sunday. It started with not paying your tithes because all of a sudden you doubted. You felt like you needed that money. And now all of a sudden everything is out of control. It starts with one. And some of us have lived with thoughts that God never gave us. We've carried the shame that God never put on us. We believe lies that God never spoke over us. And today, God is asking the same question he asked Adam. Who told you that? Who told you you were unworthy? Who told you you'd never change? Who told you you were broken? Who told you God was done with you? That's the enemy. And those lies must go. The stronghold must fall. And the thought must bow. This is your mind war. And today, by the authority of Jesus Christ, you win. You win. Go ahead and proclaim that. I win. Bring every thought into captivity. I hope this word blessed you. I hope that it changed you. I hope that it gave you the tools necessary to bring those thoughts, understanding that you tear down everything that tries to exalt itself against the knowledge of God.